We'll get started in about another minute as people are trickling in. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I apologize, a little technical problem there. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Wootten. I'm the GitHub Alliance Director at CEI, and welcome to our next webinar in our series on GitHub innovation. We recently dove deeply into advanced security, and the feedback has been terrific. Thanks to all who attended. Copilot, lots of buzz in the community and media about how cool and groundbreaking it is, but it's also raised a lot of questions about the impact on an enterprise and then the subsequent value. So today, Mandy, you can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you determine the impact on your organization and then the ROI or return on investment of Copilot adoption. Now, to frame this up, we're going to take a look at a couple examples of leading edge technologies, their tipping point of general adoption. Two of these are the Loyal Wingman program, and then we're going to look at the foundations of AI. So Mandy, we're going to go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so the Loyal Wingman is not a drone, but it's an AI-based autonomous vehicle whose principal application is to elevate the role of human pilots to mission commanders. With AI cast as the Loyal Wingman, operating under their own tactical control as a high-skilled operator of relatively low-cost robotic craft. Okay, so we've all seen the movies, Top Gun, and if you go to the first one, it's the very end of the movie where Iceman and Slider have lost their wingman, Hollywood, and then Maverick and Merlin come in and serve that role. So there are two roles that Maverick provides. He becomes an adversary where he's shooting somebody down, and he's a defender preventing Iceman from getting into trouble. But the Loyal Wingman can perform not only that, but other missions as well, such as a sensor, as a shooter, as a weapons carrier, and as a cost reducer. You know, there's a little bit of weight, but there's more to this. And here's where the real juice and all AI comes into this, is networked along with other battlefield technologies into AI-based Gen 5 fighters, such as the F-35 that we see here. They collectively provide the commander with highly relevant, focused information to maximize their situational awareness and keeping them into flow to defeat adversarial threats. Two really important points came out of that. Situational awareness, it's knowing what's going on around you. So for example, texting and driving, a bad thing, right? It causes, accidents can happen. People say, well, what happens? Well, you're distracted. Yes, that's part of it. But what happens is you've lost your situational awareness. Thus, the threats come up because you're not paying attention. And then the flow of what we're doing is very, very important too. Obviously, there's certain things you do to drive an automobile, and you have to stay in the flow of the requirements of that. The same when you are effectively developing software. So it's being aware of having that information that's relevant to you now, and then being in the flow of that continuum of just being productive or being in the groove, because developers love to develop. Now, this was conceived in the early 2000s. The DoD put out an RFI, exploratory one in 2003. It's in prototype right now, and they're talking about going into production and deployment about the mid-2030s. And as our research and a lot of other people's research has shown, a lot of times these types of technologies, there's a 20 or 30-year adoption period before that real value kicks in and it hits the general community. So do you want to go to the next one, please, Mandy? All right, let's travel back in time to 2005. For those of you familiar with Gartner and their hype cycles, this is one that I lifted from those guys. And right there, you'll see it, sitting on the rising towards the peak of inflated expectations is natural language search, which is one of the foundational components of AI that we care about, and Copilot, and certainly all the things in Bing and ChatGPT and so forth. And it's in really good company too. Look at that, it's got biometrics, and identity services, which really became a thing. If you flip over to the other side of the curve, you'll see some things that didn't go so well, such PDAs, because the iPhone came out 2 years later and pretty much crashed all that market. And some of the other things you see there happen, the other things that didn't. One more call it on this. This is pretty interesting when I was looking at this. It talks about nano computing, which is based on quantum physics. And there's been a recent breakthrough. It actually works. PBS Nova had an episode last month on this, and they did this whole thing about how they got it to work. Now, again, it only worked for a couple millionths of a second, but it's based on quantum entanglement, or the theory of relativity. Okay, now I have to tell you, I had to watch it twice to figure out that much. It was pretty complicated, but I do believe that we can confidently say that the hot tub time machine does work based on the experimentation that they've done. So let's jump in the hot tub and go back to 2023. Mandy? Next slide, please. This is a slide that has been provided by ARC Investment Management. This is their big ideas report on technology. And based on their research and their take on all this, that it works. It's a thing, and we're early on into the 10-year productivity ramp with exponential gains, or that hockey stick effect happening now. So it looks like it's real. It's looked like the adoption's taking out, but it begets this question of how do we know for sure it'll work in our enterprise? What will the impact be on it, not only from a development perspective, but as well from the entire SDLC within our DevOps framework? And then what's the financial gain, or what's the financial impact going to be on the organization? So let's jump into it today. I'd like to introduce some of my co-presenters. I'm going to turn my camera back on. There we go. So thanks. Hi, guys. Hi, Shiva. Hi, Chris. How are you guys this morning? By the way, I'm done with the cultural references to movies. I won't bring up Hot Tub Time Machine again or Top Gun, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah. So do you have a call sign? Do you have a call sign, Chris? Should we refer to you by something?
Don't tell them what my call sign is.
Okay.
It's our GitHub DevOps call signs that we have part of our team. So I'd like to introduce, that's Chris Lockhart. He's the director of our strategy and advisory services. That group within CEI answers questions like this. This is their expertise and their within the set of services they do. So just some call outs on things they've done, work with major Fortune 50s on helping them determine the impact of global data strategies, and how do you do that? What would that look like? Things about supply chain, physical supply chains, doing those types of things. A lot of stuff in healthcare, and certainly the IT that surrounds all that. Siva Kumar's my day-to-day teammate. He actually runs our whole DevOps practice and makes all the magic happen when we work with our clients. So we're going to do a couple things today. We're going to talk about the impact on an organization. But because Copilot is moving so quickly and every day there's new stuff, we thought it'd be really relevant to give you an update on Copilot X, which was released last week. And Shiv is going to run through some of that. Chris is going to jump back in and talk about our magic sauce, the way that we look at that, the best way to determine ROI, and all the factors and all the contingencies or other things you have to consider when determining is it good for my organization. And then we're going to kick back to Shiva, because we're going to demo, because it would not be a webinar with doing a little bit of demo of the cool stuff that we do. So Shiva, you want to take it?
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so let's start with the GitHub Copilot, right? So in our a technology-driven world, the efficient and productive coding, that is more crucial, because how productive we are as developers, that's how we can accelerate the overall innovation, right? Sometimes I said, day-to-day developer life, we are spending too much time on non-productive things, like doing some repetitive task, or doing some research by going through a different blogs, or a different Stack Overflow, Google search, those kind of things. So we are going back and forth out of the context and then coming back to the development activity. So more context switching is lesser productivity, right? So right now, we have the AI powered tool, or AI powered development, that is very hot, especially with the recent introduction of the ChatGPT. ChatGPT is nothing but the large language model. So the large language model is going to assist you that's able to generate all the information from the scratch, right? So that is like a little bit different from like our traditional AI approach, the ChatGPT and the large language model that is like changing the game entirely. So Microsoft already invested like $1 billion in Copilot, and they have already released this Copilot a couple of years before. Now they have invested like more into that, like $10 billion into that, so that like how we can bring this AI power or like this kind of ChatGPT kind of model to day-to-day development life, not only in the coding, how we can like cover everything in like an entire SDLC lifecycle, right? So that's what like the overall the AI power development market is going on, and GitHub is like leading that market by providing this Copilot and then like Copilot X kind of products to the developers to improve like overall productivity with that. Next slide. So let's see like what happens if I enable the Copilot. So once I have enabled the Copilot in this editor, whenever like I'm typing the code, I'm not like typing the entire code here, right? If you see here, I have added the function name, like average runtime in seconds. That context is transferred to the OpenAI model through the Copilot, and it understands like, okay, what we are trying to do in this function, right? We need to get the average runtime of successful runs in seconds. That's what we have put it in the comment, and that's what like the function name says. So the context, based on the context, it gives the suggestion like, okay, go through all the runs and find out like what is the total runtime, and then like find the average. So it just like fills all the code. So you can see like the highlighted code in the blue color in the right side image, that is like generated or like that is suggested by the Copilot. So instead of me like spending time on like, okay, how to fill that context or how to like put the logic over there, I just like give the context over there, and the Copilot is like fills everything for us, right? So that's how like the Copilot works for that. This is like one simple sample, but you can take this to like all of your development lifecycle. Like I want to write unit test for my code, and I want to write like some complex functions which I couldn't understand, or I want to do some research. If you give like the detailed prompts to your Copilot, the Copilot is able to like generate or suggest like multiple solutions for you. We will show the demo at the end of this webinar, where like how we can prompt Copilot to get like a different results, and what are the different use cases we can get, and what is the max we can get from the Copilot and all. We can show you the demo over there. Next slide. Okay, so the Copilot is already in the market for like an year, right? Some people are like already using this Copilot on their like personal or in like a part of the enterprise license. But what is like the next step in the Copilot? That's where like GitHub introduces Copilot X. So not only from the coding part, how we can bring this AI to all part of the software development lifecycle, right? So a couple of important features they have announced as part of the Copilot X is like Copilot Chat. It's going to give like the context-aware conversation with your Copilot. So the Copilot already understands the code, but you can ask the Copilot like, okay, what is this code means? Explain the code, or like give me the different suggestion of the code. You can have like basically like the chat GPT as part of your favorite editor as well. So you can have like the context-aware conversation so that it understands your code base and it answers from that code base, right? And the important piece in the development cycle is like the documentation, because we are focusing on like the innovation. Documentation is like the hardest part, or like the least important part we are focusing as the developers, right? But that's like the crucial thing we needed for the software development lifecycle. So the Copilot X is focusing on the documentation as well in two different ways. One is how to generate the documentation based on your code base, and also how we can give like some search interface so that like the new developers, they can come and easily understand like what we have written, or what is this project about, or like what is this code base about. They can like quickly search this documentation and get some personalized answer for that. If there is a new library I don't know how to use, you can ask Copilot X. It can help you to navigate through the documentation and the code base so that like you are getting into the new code base pretty quickly, right? And also the pull request, this is where like it's going to enable the collaboration between the developers, like how to write the better description, or whenever like we are reviewing it try to like answer like, okay, this is what the developer thinks of, and this is what this code does. And also like it help overall the pull request review process to review and match faster over there. And the thing is like automate testing. This is like more important piece, right? The code is like we need to test that very hardly in different use cases so that like it's bug-free code. So this is where like the Copilot is going to understand your code base and generate the test cases for like different edge scenarios, and then like craft the unit test based on your code and the documentation. And there are like other use cases as well, like the AI-powered code navigation tool, and they are going to bring like the Copilot voice for your thing. So they just bring like all the areas where it could be possible to bring AI, so that like it just elevate your SDLC developer like productivity and developer experience more like more productive there. Next slide. Okay, so the GitHub Copilot, it has like two different of licenses. One is for individuals. You can sign up for individual Copilot license, and then like get all these features on your own. But when it comes to the enterprise, that's like the different flavor, right? When it comes to the enterprise, there are like a lot of use cases that depends on the enterprise, and we need to handle like some broader license management, policy management, so that like we are putting like the guardrails on how to use this Copilot and how to get like benefit of this Copilot along with the enterprise policies, right? So the Copilot has the Copilot for business license as well, and that's going to like change completely on like how enterprise is going to use the Copilot and how enterprise can benefit from the Copilot. With that saying, like I will pass to Chris to explain detail about like how Copilot is going to help on your enterprise there.
Yeah, thanks, Siva. Yeah, so one of the things that we're always interested in, of course, is the application of new technology, right? New tech comes along, and I mean, all you have to do is look at LinkedIn, and there's 18 gazillion things about AI, right? We all know that. I think one of the questions that we've asked ourselves internally, and certainly our clients are asking, is, that's great, that's nice, I've got a new gonculator, I can do a bunch of stuff, but how do I actually derive value out of that thing? How do I know that what I'm investing in it is actually going to come out the other end with some sort of positive net ROI, right? I've got money invested in this. I don't want to just throw it down a black hole. And of course, the knock on IT always is it's just a big money pit that the business is throwing money in for the latest and greatest tools. And developers being developers, if it's the coolest thing, well, we need it, right? Well, let's take a look at how we're thinking of sort of, not just qualitative value, but quantitative. And how do we measure this? And not just measure it once, but how can we measure this in a way that sort of fosters a continuous improvement kind of cycle, right, going forward? So next slide. So first of all, I mean, and I think, Siva clearly articulated this, and I think everyone is pretty well aware of this, right? AI enablement is going to touch a whole bunch of parts of the enterprise, right? If there may be several goals that you might have, right? You might be looking at, let's use AI to accelerate development. Let's use it to cut costs. Let's use it to improve quality, whatever that might be. If you just look at a simple goal of, let's accelerate software delivery. Let's just accelerate. Let's get to market faster with the things that we have. If that's a simple goal, it seems really straightforward, right? AI is going to do it all. You plug it in, everything should be automated. Boom, boom. The reality, of course, is that it's affecting all kinds of aspects of the development lifecycle, right? Not just writing the code, but also the workflow, right? The security aspects, right? And I know we had a webinar on security related to this. It's also pretty good. You should check that one out. But collaboration between teams. I mean, one of the key things, right? And you see this a lot. We've got all the tools, we've got all the skill, we've got all the knowledge, but we still don't have high-performing DevOps. And why is that? Well, our teams aren't collaborating, right? Our operating model's not quite right. And then you get into things like testing and test data management. You've got all of these aspects, right? AI is going to impact all of that. And it's really critical to understand that, because if you're going to try to articulate, a value and show some benefits, right? It's a complicated set of scenarios here, right? We've got all of these sort of issues, right, with our existing legacy enterprise, and now we're going to automate things, and AI is going to help us with that. And of course, as we all know, if something today is bad, right, or provides a bad output, we're going to automate it. Well, now it's just going to be bad faster, right? And that's not what we want, right? We want to increase speed, yes, but we want to make sure that AI is helping us across all of these areas. So it becomes complicated, right, when you're trying to articulate a positive ROI across all of this, because some of these things are hard to account for. So it is complicated. Next slide, please. That being said, right, and one of the things that there is a study on this, and we can provide, there's the link there at the bottom, but it's a public domain study that GitHub has done, right? And it demonstrates that, the benefits of Copilot specifically, they're real benefits according to the users, right? They feel that things are faster. They feel that they are more productive. The work is more satisfying, right? And I think, Siva alluded to this, right? They report spending less time going out and searching for things and changing, context within the IDE or whatever it might be, right? They are saying that they are having a better experience using this type of technology. And whether that's productivity or whether it is allowing them to spend their time on things that are higher value, more innovative type of activities. All of that's really important, right? I'll be a little bit glib, right? I mean, that's all nice. I'm glad that they feel that it's better, right? It's like, oh, that's great, but it's subjective. I feel it's faster. Great. By how much? How much is it faster, right? This is really what we want to get to, is not just, I mean, this is important, right? But what are the improvement numbers, right? How do I prove value? If I say something is 96% faster, or I feel like it is, how do I measure that, right? And how do I put a dollar sign on that if that's the metric that I'm going after, is to lower cost? How do I put a dollar sign on that? Right? And how do I say that by adopting not just a tool, but adopting the processes and trying to really drive to a DevOps culture, right? A DevOps operating model, right? Driving towards that is going to help me achieve my objectives, whether my objective is to save money, increase quality, increase speed to market, whatever it might be. So that link right there, and I presume we'll be able to provide that to anyone that's interested in it. That link is to a study that GitHub has done in the public domain. Really, really fascinating what people are saying, and we'll have a little bit more on that here in a second. Next slide, please. If we're going to prove, right, the value of using tools like this, and I don't just mean like, well, we all know, well, of course it's going to do this, that, and the other. No. Show me in, Excel or whatever, right? Show me proof that this is going to actually lead to, me getting closer to my objectives. Well, we're going to take both qualitative and quantitative value. We've got to measure stuff. In general, what we would want to see in a proof of value approach, we'd want to be able to demonstrate a couple of things, right? We'd want to be able to show that we're spending more time building innovative software. Innovative may mean different things to different people at different levels of maturity, but basically we're doing less repetitive commodity type stuff, and we're actually doing more stuff that's of higher value to our customers, our internal constituents, other stakeholders. We want to be able to demonstrate, as Siva will do here for anyone that wants to stick around for the demo, right? Siva will show coding suggestions in real time, right? And there are real numbers here, right? Comments, the logic, right? Copilot's going to suggest what should be done. And oh, by the way, the thing gets smarter over time, right? So the more information we give it, of course, the more intelligent it becomes, until we hit the singularity, and then, who knows, everything's up in the air. But no, we want to also make sure that we are leveraging tools that the enterprise has already, right? So this isn't about like, oh, let's get the latest shiny object, and that means that all of the stuff that we've been using before is useless. No, we want to be able to demonstrate that it integrates into what we're doing today, minimal disruption. We want it to help, not to hinder the developers from doing what they're doing. And so it needs to make sure, we need to make sure and prove that we're integrating with the IDE and all of the processes that we have. And then of course, more easily find your way, right? The suggestions, context-specific suggestions, right? Is going to help the developers get through. And I think, a lot of this is where you get some of these statements like, I feel more satisfied with the work that I'm doing. I feel that quality is improved, et cetera. So we want to be able to demonstrate these things at a high level. Next slide, please. When I sort of gave short shrift to how people feel about this stuff, but I mean, people's feelings are important, right? Obviously. And so how users are feeling about it, right, that's an important metric. So when you think about sort of these qualitative feelings, I'm more productive. I can do things quickly. I'm less frustrated, right? More satisfying work in the laminar flow, right? All that good stuff, right? These are things that we do want to capture. And, an existing example of this, right? These are real numbers, right? We didn't make this up. This is right out of some real data. So these qualitative things, they matter. And as we all know, dissatisfied, disgruntled developers, it's not what anyone wants, right? We want happy developers that are doing the tasks well and quickly. So qualitative, it is important, and we want to capture it. And there are methodologies that have been used and are being used to capture that information. Next slide, please. The other important input, of course, which is what we're really trying to focus on here, is how do we quantify the improvements, right? Well, we can measure stuff. And here are some real world measurements on accelerating the development lifecycle, right? Traditional IDE, autocomplete acceptance, is between 14 and 17%, depending on the IDE and the language and things of that nature. With the control study group, right, it was 14 to 17%. With the Copilot study group, the suggestion acceptance went up to 35. And in fact, I've been on pretty good authority, it's actually higher than that, but we're rounding down. So 35% acceptance rate, right? And that's across all languages and various IDEs. I mean, that's a big improvement, right? If I'm accepting those things. Now, I think there are questions. Well, what are those suggestions? Are these things that are just sort of routine things that, it's not really intelligent, it's just sort of like spell check, right? No, I think that's an important thing. And that's one of the things that in our approach, we want to make sure that we understand and we capture, right? What are the suggestions and why are people accepting them? But it leads to much faster development. And the amount of code written by AI among Copilot users, I mean, you're approaching half. That's huge. And this is a huge improvement. Now, you could get into questions about, well, how good is that code? You could argue, is that better than what a human would write, et cetera? Those are all important aspects, especially, for example, if your metric is improving quality, right? That's something that you would obviously want to focus on. But all of this is really about, right, this is about driving positive ROI, right? You have increased productivity, people are able to do more. And let's be honest, right? Even though there may be economic uncertainty and people are saying, oh, we've got to cut costs, the amount of work is probably not going down, right? We're expected to at least continue to do what we're doing, if not more, but with less. Well, we need better productivity in order to do that. Wider use of automation, right? Obviously, that's a key part of this, and Siva's going to demo some of that in a bit. And then, of course, the one that is the unspoken bit, right? It's probably going to require fewer people to do the same amount of work. That gives us an opportunity to reposition people or reinvest that money elsewhere, however we want to look at that. So the quantification of all of this is out there. It's available. We can measure these things, and there are studies, as you'll see in that document that I shared. You can go out and take a look at that, and you'll see sort of how that calculation is done. And there are additional measurements that are beyond this that are also very interesting. They break things down by age groups and locations and things of that nature. So measurement. Next slide, please, Mandy. So what are we proposing to do with this, right? Well, look, I understand there's the qualitative and there's the quantitative. So how do we put that together and actually help you demonstrate that there's value here? Well, the first thing that we want to do is basically perform an assessment, right, of the impact of Copilot on your enterprise. Because the impact of Copilot is not necessarily going to be the same everywhere. People are at different levels of maturity. People are at different points of the hype cycle, right, Chris? Right, they're in the trough of disillusionment or wherever they may be, right? So there's going to be a different level of adoption. You may also have different levels of investment. You may have different sizes of organizations, different industries. There's regulatory impact, right? There's all of these different things. So what does Copilot mean in your context? That's critical, because you can toss all the numbers around that you want, 1,000 times improvement of this, that, the other. What does it mean in your context for your business? Really critical. Also, part of that, right, is an understanding of what are you measuring? What is the thing that you are trying to achieve? Speed, quality, cost, some combination, something else? How are you measuring those things, right? Let's understand that, because there are sort of industry standard ways of doing that. There are specific ways that are evolving in the AI space, right, to help measure those things. Let's make sure that we understand all that. We're going to help you do that. When we get this sort of assessment done, we're going to have a fit for purpose set of recommendations, right, for you in your context, with your metrics, with your objectives, right? And that's really critical, because anyone can come in and sell you like, oh, this will make things faster. It's like, great, how much faster, right? And we want to understand that. And that's really the first piece of what we are proposing to do here with this approach. The next sort of piece of that, right, is there's going to be opportunities coming out of this for automation, right? Which is, how do I actually make things with the right process, right? We want to make sure it works right first, and then we're going to make it faster. We're going to automate that, right? That's really how we're going to get a lot of, really drive a lot of that value. And that's going to, if you are looking at investing in other AI capabilities or other DevOps capabilities, it's going to actually help drive that business case. It's really critical, for those that are the buyers or people that are investing, and internal stakeholders as well, right? You're not just throwing a tool at something. You actually have a specific set of improvements that you can make. And that's the last piece, right? Which is, how do I really drive a culture of DevOps, right? Because to be a high-performing DevOps organization, with or without Copilot, but to be high-performing, right? It's not just the tool. It's more than that, right? And there are examples, and lots of us probably know out there, right, of examples of, we've got the tools, we've got the skill, we've got all the knowledge, something's still not quite working right. We don't have a high-performing DevOps team, and that's because we don't actually have a proper culture. That maybe the teams don't talk to each other, those sorts of things. We don't have the processes really worked out. Well, part of getting there is making sure that you're able to measure incremental improvement, right, and have that feedback on itself, so you have that continuous improvement over time, and you continue to measure. That's really how you get to that sort of stratospheric level where organizations that really perform really, really well, they do that really, really well, and they constantly measure. And so all of this approach is really to give you, a set of tools to ensure that the tool that you're implementing and the process that you're implementing help you get to where you need to go. Next slide, please, Mandy. So we have a very sort of specific approach here, right? And it's kind of multiple parts, and it's really around predicting the value that you would achieve by implementing Copilot, and then validating that prior to a rollout, right? Let's do some focused, targeted assessments and make sure that what we think we're going to get is what we're going to get. So we start that, as you might imagine, with some discovery, with some planning, right? We want to understand, what are the business processes that we're impacting by implementing Copilot? And really that's getting into, you may have specific things that you do in your organization that are maybe a little bit different. Let's understand that, right? And there's going to be success criteria around all of that, right? I will claim that this is successful if things get faster, things get cheaper, whatever it might be, right? Part of this really up front is, you're not going to go boil the ocean with this thing, right? You want to identify, there's 3 sort of use cases that I can identify that will address all of those areas I mentioned earlier: security, testing, right? All of those pieces. We have to take that into account, because if we just throw the tool in and, oh, look, I accepted, more suggestions than before, that doesn't really tell us anything about that whole ecosystem of other activities that are taking place. And certainly the stakeholders that own those areas I'm thinking of security primarily, but there are others, right? Risk, et cetera, right? They're not going to be as convinced if you don't incorporate their particular use cases as part of what you're trying to test for. So that's really critical to make sure that we're looking at the right things in the right way. Got to mobilize the team. There are probably some other considerations also in this upfront piece, which is really around some of the other, I mentioned advanced security earlier. Again, another shout out, go look at that webinar. That was pretty good, right? But there are other aspects of the tooling that you might want to take into consideration before you go forward. What do you get at the end of that? Well, you get sort of the thing that, and I know if we're talking to a group of developers, they don't want to hear we need requirements, but we need some level of like, what are we trying to achieve and how do we know that we're being successful and what use cases are we testing, right? And there's also going to be an outcome here which sort of says, look, your maturity is X, and therefore you are either going to struggle more or it's going to be an easier adoption as you go forward. And that's really what we want to do, is really understand before we launch into anything. The second piece of this, which doesn't have to go in parallel, some of this, or it doesn't have to go sequentially, some of this could be parallel, but there's this value analysis piece, right, which is really, really critical here. And I've been talking about this a lot, right? How do I know that I'm using the right metrics, that I'm measuring for the right things for the right reason, so that I understand how am I getting closer to my objective? Right? Now, you may have things that you already measure. My agile team can do however many story points in a sprint, whatever it might be, right? There are metrics, and there are lots of metrics. So let's understand, what are you measuring? How do you measure those things? What makes sense to continue to measure with Copilot in place? Is there some baselining that we need to do? What does it look like without Copilot? It looks like X. Okay, great. Now we know when we implement Copilot, if we're going to get 2X or 3X or 4X, what does that look like? How are we going to articulate that story, right? So really critical. And by the way, there are industry KPIs, and Siva could probably answer questions on this, right? There are industry KPIs around this, right? And they're evolving assessments, if you will, or maturity levels. I'm thinking of the GitHub Copilot evidence research, right? The SPACE framework to really identify like where you are in this. But there are industry KPIs, so you may not be measuring the right thing in our opinion, right? And so we can hash that out in this value analysis piece. But what's really critical to all of this is getting to that definition of what the expected outcomes are, right? Not just qualitatively, but quantitatively. If I apply Copilot to these use cases, given these metrics, given this set of standards that I'm measuring against, give me an improvement number. And maybe that's a speed percent, maybe that's a dollar savings, whatever that might be in your context, right? That's really critical. We can predict now, if you do this, you will see this as the result. And those are really the outcomes, right? The baselining, the metrics, the methodology, and that ROI analysis. What should I expect to achieve by using Copilot in these scenarios? And then, of course, we want to test that. Let's run some proofs of concept or pilots, or however you want to frame them up in your particular organization, right? Let's look at the control statistics. Let's look at Copilot enhanced operations, right? Let's execute those particular use cases with some test scenarios, right? And let's measure the heck out of this thing and assess that performance so that we know, right? Listen, we thought we were going to save a gazillion dollars, and we saved a gazillion dollars. Let's articulate that. By the way, I don't think it's going to be a gazillion particularly, but it could be a lot. We also want to make sure that we're reporting this. There are going to be stakeholders, again, all of those other areas, especially aforementioned security, but I'm thinking testing, I'm thinking all these other groups, they're going to want to know, like, well, how much better are things getting, and how does that impact my particular area? Let's make sure that we have the right reporting and the dashboarding to articulate that during these POCs. Now, you might want to run, maybe you have 5 use cases you want to test, and you can achieve the testing of those with one proof of concept. Maybe you want to run multiple ones, right? Maybe you want to do several in parallel. Maybe you need to just repeat this as needed until you identify the success criteria that you want to see. So what do you get out of that? Well, you are going to get those test cases, those use cases tested, and you're also going to validate sort of the value piece of this. I know by doing this, I'm going to speed up my development lifecycle by X%. Once we get that in place, then it's, look, we've identified what we believe success looks like. We have calculated what we think we will get out of doing this in this particular context. We have validated that by running some proofs of concept. Now let's go deploy this thing, right? So there's people, skill, perhaps aspects to this process is certainly technology improvements. One of the things that we do, and I'll talk about this in just a second, is we can coordinate some of that licensing piece of the puzzle with you. But I mean, all of this is about best practices, workflow, tooling, right? All of those aspects, right? And that's part of the thing that we would also do as part of this process. And the ultimate goal of this, right, is you get to the end, you get a production deployment, you have predicted those things that you're going to see, you're measuring for them, and you're going to continue to measure for them as you get better with this. Next slide, please. Free stuff. It's free. We're going to give you something for free. We're offering a free half-day workshop. We're going to help you, right, in that half day. We're going to help you understand what Copilot will mean to your enterprise. We're going to help you figure out in your context how to quantify the improvement, given the metrics that you are currently measuring and given what you are trying to achieve, right? So what is the business impact? We're going to help you get there. We're going to do that in that half day, right? We're going to help determine how Copilot is going to address your goals, right, with actual measurements on paper or in Excel, right? Some physical out thing that you can take back, right? And use to either justify an investment or to validate things that you were already thinking, et cetera. And we've got a methodology behind this. And in just a second, I'll show, like, we've done this in a number of places. But if you need more information, if you want to sign up for this workshop, which I think you do, I think you all do, you got to contact Chris Wootten. Call sign. What's your call sign, Chris?
Don't do it. Don't.
Okay,
don't,
I won't do it.
Don't do it. All right.
Well, no call signs. Just contact Chris Wootten. C Wootten at CEIamerica.com, or reach out to me or Siva or anyone else, or find us on LinkedIn. We should put our LinkedIn stuff on here, but reach out, because this is free, no obligation, no money down, none of that stuff, right? This is, let us help you figure out what this might mean for you in your enterprise.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Let me just jump in there real quick, Chris, before we
Well,
jump into this.
I was going to throw to you here anyway, so there
All
you
right,
go.
so great. So go back a slide, Mandy. So let's go back and talk a little bit about this. So we talk a lot in this really robust DevOps practice we have, and certainly our partnership with GitHub and Microsoft on this. And we talk about CI/CD a lot, which is all about automation. We talk about infrastructure as code. And now we're talking about Copilot as that next level of automation, as that trust, that loyal wingman, right? And if I understand what you're saying is that each of these collectively across that, call it the DevOps SDLC, as you're introducing more and more automation, they're all going to have impact on it. Thinking of an accordion, how it stretches and then compresses that entire framework on that. So that's all part of the consideration, if I'm hearing you right, on doing all this. It's like, especially I think about the input side of it too, is that let's say you've got a 2-week sprint cycle, and you've got a sprint team, and they're really good at estimating, right? They've got a good historical record of, like, if we take story points and we t-shirt size them, small, medium, large. Based on that, we're good at estimating what we can knock out in 2 weeks. Then we bring Copilot in. Week 1, great. Week 2, Tuesday, we're out of work now. That's not only going to impact from the input side of the business, right, from requirements, but also the flow going into now QA testing, whatever, however your individual process is set up on that. And these are all considerations. Now, by the way, each one of those I think is a positive that I just mentioned, right? Because the business, like, we're going faster, I'm in, right? Those are the things we want to be reporting back to the business. So Shiva, one question for you before I go into a little bit of something on who we are. You mentioned in one of the benefits of Copilot X for Business when it was talking about policy. Is that important to, can you talk a little bit about how that impacts like regulated industries where compliance is part of that? Does that help with that compliance cause?
Yes, so definitely, like, a Copilot for Business is supporting like enterprise-wide policy management. So you can define like, okay, what are the code base you want to like look for, and what are the code bases it should avoid for like bringing the suggestions, and how you can regulate your Copilot usage within your enterprise or within your organization. So there are like a lot of policy management rules you can apply, especially for the regulated industries such as like healthcare or finance or like any other thing.
Sure, even like Sarbanes-Oxley with separation of duties and things like that, which doesn't, you know, that just happens nowadays. But like, I'm old guy, right? I remember back in the early 2000s when we were sorting this out when SOX first came out, and we had to figure all that out. We didn't know how to do it back then, and so but now it's just become baked in. So that's a cool thing. So Mandy, do you want to jump to the next slide? By the way, folks, demo coming up, and while we're waiting, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. We will do a little QA later. We're probably going to move it to the end of today's session. But anyway, so who is CEI? We like to not talk about this when we start. We like to get it right about the middle. So CEI is a 30-plus-year-old IT consultancy that does a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously, this particular practice area that we work in around GitHub, DevOps, this whole universe, this is actually our nearest and dearest and oldest competency we have. We've been doing it since 2004. We check every single box there is in all the advanced programs and have a really great qualified team who all certified to go deliver these types of things. To who? To our clients, partnering with GitHub. We have done over 350 engagements to date. So we've met a lot of people. And by the way, we do workshops like the one we talk about. What's in it for us? We get to meet you. It's as simple as that. Get to know who we are. At some point, if you want some help, either going through the justification of Copilot or looking for other services that we can provide, you at least know who we are. Mandy, next slide, please. So what technologies? The question is, what technologies do we don't know? Would probably be a better question on this slide, but those are our practice areas on the far left side, our competencies, and then the technology that we get involved in. And certainly we have some many relationships with many of those vendors. Our services are delivered in several different ways: strategy and advisory, which is the group Chris works in. Shiv and I are in our technology solutions. Our managed services, we have a global presence around the world, and then our talent solutions and staffing. So what do we do, by the way? We have close to 800 employees, and what do most of them do when they come to work? They're like you, they love to build software. That's what we do, is our primary business, and we're really, really good at that. And Mandy, bang to the next slide. And as I mentioned, we have a global presence through the United States, down in South America, Western Europe, and over in Asia. So pretty cool stuff. So some great by the way, Palma, Spain, I've actually been there when I was a younger guy. That is quite a location. I have yet to be there for CEI. I hope to look forward to that.
That's close to Ibiza, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it's an island in the Mediterranean. It is. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, great. And so I think, Shiva, let's jump past the Q&A. Let's demo.
Yep, sure. Okay, you can see the screen, right? Yep. So let's start with the demo. I'm going to keep this demo like a very simple, and then slowly moved into like a more complex scenarios, right? The simple is just to make sure how the Copilot works, what are the different things we can do with Copilot, so that we can take that information and put it in the largest context, right? It's not like something with the remaining time, I'm not going to say okay, develop everything in 5 minutes. We can do, but here I'm going to give more textual information, what are the things Copilot can do there, right? So I have this simple JavaScript file. Now I have enabled this Copilot extension. You can see the Copilot icon over here. That is we need to sign up with our GitHub credentials over there. So we can install this extension in any editors, as we have talked before. You can use Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or any IntelliJ editors, Vim. So there are a lot of different editor support which you are doing it in day to day, right? So now I'm going to write some simple functions in this JavaScript So what I'm going to do is like, okay, let me do some comment. I want to generate a random number between, you can see it just like give the suggestion, the Copilot. So whatever this one, that is like the Copilot. Okay, before going that, I will just increase the font size so that everyone can see bigger. So it says like between 1 and 100, but I'm going to say like, okay, let's do like a min and max value, right? So I'm saying like, okay, generate the random number between min and max. It understands the context, and you can see it just provides the function automatically, right? So I'm not going to write anything. I'm just like pressing the tab here, and then it finishes the functions. So it says like, okay, math.floor random max minus min plus min. This one, like I usually do by going through Stack Overflow or Google and get this random number thing, right? But here, I just like type the comment over there, like basically the comment driven kind of development, and the function names. It understands the context and it's giving the solutions. But let's say like I want to forget about the comment. I want to like directly type the function name, right? For example, whether it's prime number or not. Okay. So I'm saying like the number, and then you can see it just like provide the complete function to identify whether the number is prime or not. It understand not only from the comment, it understand from the function name also, right? So you can see like it understand like, okay, it is the prime. I'm going to give the logic like how to calculate the number is the prime over there, right? So that's what like it's doing here. But let's see, like I don't like this solution, right? I want to like try the different solutions. So what you can do is like open the Copilot completions panel. So it just like go through there and identify like all the solutions, the possible solution for this function. And then it's going to suggest like all the solutions over there, right? So here you can see, give few minutes, or probably this is the only solution it has. But you can like get the different solution there, and then like it will list you the number of solutions over here, right? So that's how like the Copilot works. Since I just put like the number and the prime, it understand like, okay, that's what we are going to do, and it keep on suggesting like what are the number related functions we can add. So I'm just like quickly going through like everything, and then like it automatically queue all the suggestions for you, right? So that's how like the Copilot works. It understands your code base, not only the current file. It understands like whatever the open files in your workspace, and try to get like max out of the context, like what you are trying to do and what are the different solutions you are trying to build. It automatically gives a suggestion as you are going through, right? Still, developer is doing the development. They want to think the logic, but that the logic thing, that's where like the loyal wingman kind of thing, the Copilot is coming. It says like, okay, this is what you are trying to do, I'm going to help you on that, right? Otherwise, like it didn't know like what we are going to do. It understands based on like the queue and based on like the comment we are developing there. Okay, so this is like the JavaScript, right? But I want to build like a more detailed functionalities. So let's say like I'm a JavaScript developer. I want to do some Python program, right? I have never used Python before. This is my first time I'm using the Python. How to do that? So that's why like the Copilot is coming in. So I'm going to say like, okay, again, like the same command, right? Like find the maximum value in a list. So it just like give, okay, this is how you need to find the maximum value in the list. It just like fills up. I don't know the Python syntax, or like I don't know the Python library. It is able to help me like how to run the Python, because I'm focusing on the logic. I'm not focusing on like the syntax or like the other context things, which is like taking my productivity down, right? Okay, so I have developed these kind of functions, but I need to test this function, right? So how we can like generate the test cases for testing these different functions. So let's say like I want to do some test case here. Okay, the Copilot is thinking.
Did we lose Siva? There he is.
Right. So, and then like I can keep on going, like what are the other stuff I have to do? The Copilot is still thinking. But like that's the overall idea we are having, like you can write any functions or like anything. Okay, let's go back to like a more intermediate kind of scenario, right? Let's say like I'm having a .NET application. I have this program, but I want to create here the data models in my program, right? So I want to create like, let's say the webinar kind of application we are building. We want to create a models like a speaker model, session model, and like attendees model, so that like we are creating some applications around it. Typically what we have do in like a developer stage is like, okay, we identify what are the properties we have to add and go through like each model and try to build those properties. Those are like the time consuming, right? So here I'm just saying like, okay, create a create session, speaker, and attendee models with relationships. Let's say with the relationships. Then say like what we need to do here, like a session. The Copilot is like giving all the solution, and it will try to generate like all those models for us, right? You can see like it just getting this stuff. So you can see like it just created all the possible property for the session. So everything is like quickly figured out, right? Otherwise, like I have to go through like, okay, what are the properties we have to add, how to think through all those stuff. You can see like just creates the entire data model for the session. The same thing, like now I can go here and say like, okay, let's create like the speaker model. And then it just like quickly finds out like what are the properties in the speaker model and then go to. That's it, right? So you can see like how fast I'm creating this model. Not only the model, you can create like the entire data access class, and then like how you can create the controller class and the API. So you can like quickly build your ideas and build your solutions, everything using the Copilot like pretty fast over here, right? So that's how like the Copilot works. There are like other functionalities. For example, let's say, let's go back to this method, right? So I want to see like calculate distance between two latitude and long points, right? So it's just like giving the function name, all those stuff.
So Siva, it looks like even I could be a developer.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're already a developer, but whatever like the logic you are thinking, it's just like try to get everything there, right? Okay, so it just like finishes the functions here, right? But let's say like this is where the Copilot is like adding more value, the Copilot X kind of stuff. I have enabled the Copilot Labs. It has like additional features. For example, let's say like I'm a new developer, like Chris is coming here and he want to understand like, okay, what is this logic doing? I want to explain this code base a little bit better, right? So we have this Copilot Lab extension. This is kind of like the Copilot X. So you can say like, okay, I want to explain this code, select the code and explain this. The Copilot is saying like, okay, this is what we are doing. This is how we need to calculate the radius of the Earth in kilometer and do those stuff and everything, right? But let's say like, okay, what does this code do, right? So if you ask the Copilot, it says like, okay, calculate the distance between two latitude and longitude using what formula, what is the radius of the Earth. So it's just like trying to explain in like a simple English, so that like it just giving the different context, like what is the code does, and what is like the example of using the code. So everything is like the Copilot is giving the context, right? This is especially like a very helpful when I am like going to the code base which is already developed, the legacy code base. I don't know like what they have done, right? So I can ask the Copilot so that like I can understand like what it does and try to get like context out of that, right? So you can ask like the example and other stuff. You can see here like it's trying to pass some latitude, longitude, and then get the distance, those kind of things. Okay, so we are explaining the code. What are the other things we can do, right? So you can see like there are different brushes here. You can suggest the test for the function, which you can see like it's giving some new test here, the unit test here, like how do you want to test? And let's say like you want to add some documentations here, right? So let me say document this code. Okay, so it just like generate the document. It didn't do it in the comment, but yeah, you're trying to generate the document and provide like what the link it is using, those kind of stuff. And then like you can add more, okay, document all the steps in the code, or like make this code more robust and break this code into smaller chunks. So you can do like different things here so that like you are able to basically like refactor the code using the AI assistance here, right? Yeah, when I click like the breakup, it just like create a separate function for this haversine formula. Okay, so these are the different things you are doing in your context, like especially when we are developing, it understands the context and everything. So you are like keep on going on. It's just like the Copilot fills in the space, right? Now let's go to like a little bit complex example. So I'm like I have like the application. I want to Dockerize that and putting it in like the Kubernetes cluster, right? That kind of enterprise kind of use cases. So I'm using like a Terraform as my infrastructure as code. Again, like I have very limited experience in the Terraform, but I'm going to say to the Copilot like, hey, I want to create a infrastructure, right? For let's say like I want to have like a Azure resource group and then AKS cluster with and Azure container registry, right? So once I did that, you can see it's just like trying to generate all the infrastructure as code, the Terraform stuff based on like the command we have added, right? So it just created the resource group, we just created the container registry, and I have like the Kubernetes cluster with the default node pool, add-on profile and everything. So if I run this, it should be able to create like the entire resource group, cluster, container registry, or whatever you can add that. So typically like how I do is I go to the Terraform documentation, try to understand like what are the resources I want and what are the parameters that requires, and then bring it. But here like I'm just gave that information. I didn't switch my context. I'm still being in the editor itself, right? But it's keep on going on like, okay, what are the different things I want to have here, and then go for that, right? But let's say like I want to add like a more thing. I want to change this tags from like the variable. So here I can say like var.tags, it understand. Or like I want to do some merge here. So it just like go for like, okay, go for the var.tags and have the default tag over there. So it not only forcing, it just like not forcing its solution to you, it just like helps you there, right? So you can still have the control like, okay, I'm modifying everything. This is not like, it looks like what I want. You can go there and like modify that, but it just gives like the overall stub and the complete structure over there, so that like you can quickly build your application, generate like more tests. Not only in like one area, you can do like an infrastructure as code or like any DevOps template or any other Python, data science program. So you can apply this to like everywhere, even that is like new to you. As long as like you understand the logic, how to do everything, the Copilot is going to help you there, right? So that's how like we are quickly developing the complete infrastructure as code for AKS cluster or other things using the Copilot in like a more enterprise related use cases there, right? Okay, with that one, I'm going to stop here. If you have like any questions, let me know. Give a try on this Copilot, and as usual, like there are a lot of use cases. We can help you on like how this Copilot can help you on the use cases and how we can get max out of the Copilot in your day-to-day life cycle, right?
Okay, thank you, Shiva. Nice job on that. So, I think, so a couple things. First, we think the chat's broken. That's why we're not getting messages in today. We're also at the top, we're actually past the top of the hour. So we're gonna wrap up. So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get a follow-up email. It'll have my email address in there. So if you have any questions, feel free to email your questions.
We actually have a handful of questions here that
Do
I
we?
can. Yes, we do.
Oh,
Yeah. Do you want me to go through those now?
sure, let's do it.
All right. The first one, will it work with GitLab?
It's a GitHub-based product. It works with your favorite editors, and also like a GitHub code space and the GitHub ecosystem, right?
But actually, I do believe, you know, just to be open about this, I do believe it can work with GitLab. So that's not a problem.
All right. The second question, it's kind of 2 in 1. Can use of Copilot result of any internal private/enterprise code it ran on into private other public projects? That's the first half.
Can you repeat the question, Mandy?
Yes.
To understand it correctly.
Can use of Copilot result of any internal private/enterprise code it ran on into private other public projects?
Yeah, so that's like that's what GitHub has in the roadmap for their Copilot for Business. If I understand correctly, like you were asking for whether the Copilot can train from the private enterprise data, right? So they have like a plans to basically like look up at your repositories and then like get how to use the repositories data. So let's say like in enterprise, we have the different use cases, right? Especially with the shared services kind of model. We are developing like a lot of shared libraries that is using across the enterprise. So the idea here is like the Copilot for Business, they can like get the context, again, like not train on the model. This is like more transformational AI. It's not going to train on that. It's getting the context from your repositories, right? So it should be able to get the context from the list of repositories you are selecting in the Copilot for Business. And then like whenever your enterprise developers are using the library, it should be able to give that information, or it should be able to give that suggested solution. So that is like in the roadmap. GitHub has like more advanced use cases around how effectively you can use the enterprise repositories for these kind of suggestions there.
All right, the second half of that question, which you may have answered, how does Copilot address privacy and trade secret concerns?
Chris, you want to take this question?
From a technology perspective, I think that's more in your hopper, but I think, so one of the things that we would want to do, right, as going through this process, and that goes back to the bit about ensuring that all of the stakeholders are included in what we're trying to test for, right? And so one of the success criteria of leveraging Copilot, and one of the things you'd want to test for in a proof of concept is, right, the degree to which it aligns with and meets the need of the risk organization or whoever is putting in place the requirements for privacy and security, right? So you have to have InfoSec involved in this, and that's why, I've said this a couple times, right? It's not as easy as just like fire up the license and go. You need to have those other stakeholders as part of that process. I don't know if within the tool Siva, there are specific. I know there's GitHub Advanced Security, which can be used in partnership with this, but I don't know if there are additional security elements that are part and parcel of Copilot specifically from a technology perspective.
Yeah, from the technology perspective, this is part especially when it comes how we can share the enterprise data. Is it like going outside those kind of privacy, right? So there are a lot of improvements that's coming in. The first thing is we need to understand this is not training on your data. This is the transformational AI, as I have said before. So anything that's going outside, that is the context, not your entire code base or something like that, right? So that's the difference between how the traditional AI works and how the generative AI works. But to the next question, GitHub is trying to put all the security measure as much as possible so that we can prevent these kind of data privacy data issues there. One of the thing is you can select what are the permissible license code you want to have, and also you can select what are the things you want to have in your own enterprise organization itself, not going outside those kind of things.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things the GitHub is doing the security measures from their side.
Yeah, so if I hear some of this right, so we got a governance thing that comes into play that shouldn't be there to begin with, right? Having access to it. However, the reality of the world is those things do happen, and that's really one of the functions around advanced security is to expose and tag those secrets or data that should not be there at all in that, and that's part of the thing that we do when we run secret scanning, and we do some POCs around that. So in Harmony, the answer to the question is yes. But the tools, as I understand it, work hand in hand. And as Shiva pointed out, there is a roadmap that these things are going to be more integrated and pulled together. So I hope that answered your question. We give a very long answer to a simple question, but hope we addressed it. Mandy, do we have any others?
Yes, we still have a few left. How does GitHub Copilot for Enterprise, or does GitHub Copilot for Enterprise need a different license than GitHub Enterprise?
The license wise, it's pretty much if you have GitHub Enterprise, you can buy the Copilot business licenses as well, right? It's an add-on to your existing enterprise license. The same applied for a GitHub Advanced Security or Action Minutes. So pretty much if you have the enterprise license, we can help you, or GitHub can offer these add-ons so that you can try within your enterprise license.
All right. The second question was, can you please demonstrate the documentation with Copilot?
That's part of the Copilot X. The Copilot X is going to be announced pretty soon. Right now, we are doing with the basic license and the labs, but the Copilot X, it's part of your GitHub ecosystem as well, right? So whenever I'm saying the documentation, not only the documentation from the code, you can get the documentation from the GitHub repositories itself. So stay tuned for that the Copilot X release update, hopefully mostly in these build conferences and other things. But that's where you are going to get the documentation features over there.
Yeah, and to that, when this was announced last week, there was overwhelming demand for people to get trial licenses of Copilot X for business, and GitHub is a little beside themselves trying to keep up with that right now, including with the partner ecosystem that we're a little backlogged on it too. But that's a great question. And if you want to take, and all the emails that have my information in it, you'll get a follow-up one on that. If you want to send me a note, the person who asked that question, we would be more than happy once we get that locked down. We'll be in the next week or so. More than happy to set up a session and show that to you and any others who are interested. And of course, any licensing questions you have, you've got a really sporty GitHub account representative ready to help you at any moment. We can help you find them too.
All right, on to the next question.
Nothing in there about like Top Gun or like the AI thing plays beach volleyball. Nothing about that.
Unfortunately, no. It says whatever suggested is an entry-level programmer suggestions from Copilot. How can it give expert level suggestions?
You can get the expert level suggestions. Since I want to like keep it very simple here to show the value, this is like the entry level kind of thing, right? But if you see like the infrastructure as code, the Terraform thing I have just put there, it's giving like more detailed output there, right? So if you want to have like the complex stuff, you want to guide the Copilot having like the right prompt you want to have, right? So there is a new term in like the blogs and other stuff you can see is like prompt engineering. So you can try like the different prompts to navigate through your complex logic so that you can get that kind of expert level suggestions from the Copilot. So such the term prompt engineering, I will also send like some guide so that like how you can take simple to like the complex logic you want to build. The complex in the sense like the same expert kind of stuff, right? So how you can like get that out of the Copilot, you can like get more information from there. If you read prompt engineering, I will just send the link in the chat.
All right. Can you demonstrate unit testing features of Copilot?
It can, you want to.
Okay, I'll change
Yeah.
it there. There you go.
Share the screen. Okay, this is like really attractive QA session. Give me a second. That's what like I try to show in this, the Python. Okay, so you can see like the find max function. And if I'm doing like the test find max, it try like the different scenarios, right? Like find max on the sorted array, find max on like the unsorted array, and with the negative numbers, with only one element, with the empty. So you can see like it just like trying to create like the different use cases for this function, right? So that's how like you can create the function and it understand like what are the things we are trying to do and bring up like a different stuff. It's suggesting the same thing, but I can say like find max with float value or something like that. It should be able to generate those stuff. So this is how like you can generate the unit test for your functions.
All right. And the next question, for clients that are very sensitive about their IP and do not want any risk of their code being shared / public, is there a risk or any need for concern? In other words, are we confident that the code base we work on will not silently be uploaded to the cloud for analysis or sharing?
That's a part like which we have already answered before, right? First thing is the traditional AI is different from the generative AI. Generative AI needs like the prompt and the context, not like your entire data, right? And the second thing is like GitHub has a lot of governance model and the policies to prevent that in two ways, right? One is what are the code base you want to use, you want to like train on. And the second thing is like to prevent your code base is like not going out elsewhere, right? So those are the different policy management GitHub is like that.
Yeah, and Siva, I mean, we're also working with another client right now. You know, this very particular thing came up as one of their requirements, and we've been able to handle that convincingly for them.
Yep.
All right, that was the last question.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. And thanks everyone for attending today. As I mentioned, you'll be getting a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this, which feel free to share it with people you know who didn't make it or some of your coworkers. And if you have any additional questions, once we close down, my email address will be there. Please feel free to pop me an email. I'll make sure that gets routed to Shiva or one of his team members, and we'll get you the answer on those things. And again, everyone, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned. Keep your eye on your emails from us as we get into our next webinar, probably coming early this summer. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Shiva. Thanks, Chris, and Mandy. Thanks for working the technology, because I'm not that good at it, but thank you.
You're welcome. All right, see you, everyone.
Bye now.